Okay, for this image, we're mainly going to use the clone stamp tool to get rid of her jewelry and build back in the edge of her arm where the jewelry is covering up that. We're going to get rid of this tattoo. There's kind of a mole on her arm here, a couple of kind of large freckles or moles on her cheekbones in here. I'm going to get rid of her earrings here as well, which is going to mean I'm going to have to rebuild a portion of her ear. And then just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and whiten the whites of her eyes and her teeth a little bit as well. So I'm going to zoom in, hitting Command 0. When I'm using the clone stamp tool, which is this tool here, I normally want to end up using the hardness at about 50% or so. And I noticed that this freckle here is along kind of the shadow line of her arm, so I don't want to clone from down in here where it's a lot lighter. Instead, I want to pick an area that's kind of similar on the same kind of angle of her arm. I hold down the little bitty option button, I click once to load up some sample, and I click on top of it. I need to make sure that my brush is slightly larger than what I'm trying to go after, but not considerably larger, so it's just a little bit bigger than that freckle. I'm going to then switch over because I'm going to work on her face, and I'm going to take the hardness down to 0, and I'm going to option click, kind of follow the contours of her cheekbone to get rid of that dot. Do the same thing over here to get rid of that one, and the same thing here to get rid of that, and maybe one more here. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of lessen these bags under her eyes. So to do that, I need to make the brush a little bit bigger so that it's about this size. I'm at about 40 pixels. I'm going to hold the option button down here below it, and I'm going to drag to get rid of that. And then when I'm done, I'm a little worried that I smeared it too much, or everybody has some bags under their eyes. So if I hold down Command-Shift-F, pops up the fade command. If it's at 100%, that means it's not fading anything yet. If I take it down to 0, it will get rid of everything I did. I'm going to say that a lot of the times when people are doing this as kind of a speed thing, they do it about 50%. So that's where I'm going to let that one go. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to option click below this bag, and I'm going to drag back in through there. Command-Shift-F, type in 50, and click OK. Now to get rid of these objects on her arm, the problem I might run into is if I was to come in here and try to clone, I might accidentally do something like this to her arm. Or I could also accidentally come in here and do this to her arm, and then I have to worry about rebuilding the shape of that arm. So probably the best thing to do is to go get the quick selection tool, make a quick selection on her arm, but I don't really care how good it is. I'm only worried about how good it is here and here. I'm going to hit the Q command to get into the quick mask mode and zoom in a little bit by hitting Command and then the kind of plus or the equals button. And I'm going to go get the paintbrush tool. And when I'm in the quick mask, if I paint with black, that means add to my red selection, or if I paint with white, that means paint with everything but the selection. And while I'm here, I probably want to make sure that my hardness maybe about 80 or so. And maybe this is a little bit big, so I'm going to hit the open bracket tool to reduce the size of the brush slightly. So I'm back to maybe about 30. And then with the black ink selected, I'm going to just go ahead and paint over this part of the jewelry. And I'm going to try to estimate where the edge of her arm would have been. And then down here, I'm going to switch to white paint, and I'm going to get rid of the jewelry right here. Trying to just brush along in here until I think that I've got kind of a straight line. I'm going to hit the Q to get out of this. I'm going to go back to the quick selection tool and go to select and mask. I'm just going to see what I've got here, and one thing I might do a little bit is I might hit the smooth a little bit, just because I could tell that she was a little bit pixelated on the selection. That's all I'm going to change there, and I'm going to click OK. Now that I have this area selected, it would be pretty simple for me to come back over here and get the clone stamp tool. And again, I'm going to want to try to go at the angle of her arm, so that like where the shadow starts, I want to make sure I'm covering it here rather than accidentally taking the light part of her arm and moving it down into here like this. If I was to do this, that could create just a mess. So I'm going to try to start, maybe get rid of some of the ones here in the middle. I want my brush to be slightly larger than the baubles are. And I'm going to option click over here, kind of going uphill at this angle. I'm going to rub that one out. And that one, I'm going to do maybe 2 or 3 at a time. And I'm going to come back to get this one. And again, by having the selection here, it should prevent me from accidentally adding to her arm down here. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the same thing. I see this kind of vein area in here, so I'm going to want to try to copy that as I need on this one to probably make my brush bigger. So I'm up to 50 pixels now. I'm going to hit Option, well away from the jewelry. Because if I don't, if I put it right here, as soon as I start to paint, I'm going to just end up moving the jewelry to another place. So I'm going to hit Command Z on that to undo it. Option, and I'm just going to wiggle a little bit in here. Option, wiggle a little bit more. Option click, let go of everything, then wiggle along in here. Oops, started to duplicate that, so I got to go back and fix that. Trying to paint this ink all the way to the edge of my selection. I'm going to follow this kind of, again, vein line right here. Clicking in the shadow area. Let's get rid of that string as well. I'm going to make sure I brush that all the way to the edge. Now here's one of the shortcuts that you need to remember. Command-Shift-I makes the inverse. I can find that up here probably by going to Select and Inverse. And I'm going to zoom out just so you can see what this does. Command-Shift-I. It moved the marching ant box from just being around her arm, but there's nothing up in here, to Command-Shift-I. Now means I have everything but her arm selected. So now I could just come up here, since I've got a white background, Option click up here, and just paint the white to the edge of her arm. When I'm done, I'm just going to hit Command D, and I can go back and see if there's anything that I need to do. I could possibly try to get rid of this thing. I'm going to make this much smaller. I'm down to like 20 right now. I'm going to try to click on this part of her arm. There's this one spot there. One spot right there. Down here. Try to fill in that one thing there. Maybe just walk that up to it until I decide that that is good enough for what I'm trying to do. I'm going to take a similar approach to her earrings. I'm going to go get the quick selection tool. I'm going to hit Command D to make sure nothing's selected. I'm going to select her face all along in here. I might as well just go ahead and do all of her face right now too in her earring. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit the Select and Mask button up here. So on this one too, I'm pretty sure that the edge of her face is just pixelated enough because this picture is kind of a little bit blurry. So I'm going to move this smooth slider over a little bit. When you do that, you should see this kind of round out a little bit more rather than being so pixelated. Probably can't see that on my screen. But I'm going to hit OK. And now that I've got her face selected, I want to do the inverse again. So I'm going to hit Command-Shift-I, so now it's everything but the face. This is basically going to protect her face from what I'm doing. And I'm going to Option click down here. I'm going to kind of follow some of the contours of her hair. And I can probably switch to a bigger brush. Get rid of some of that. Some longer strokes along to follow where her hair would end up being. I think I've got rid of that, so I'm going to move over to her other ear. Once again, I see some hair strands here at this angle, so I'm going to go ahead and try to move with them, just like waxing or sanding a floor. Try to move with the grain as much as possible to hide what you're doing. Okay, now I got a problem here though, and that is that the mask included part of her earring. So I'm going to hit Q, and what I want to do here is, since I don't want that part of the mask, I'm going to go get the paintbrush tool with some black, and I'm going to go ahead and wiggle in here and get rid of that earring. I'm going to hit Q to get out of that. I'm going to go back to finishing, getting rid of the earring portion. And I'm going to hit Command D. I'm going to take a look at her ear. Actually, that worked out pretty good. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to get the brush tool with 0 hardness on it. What I'm going to try to do now is with a very small brush, I'm at like 10 pixels, I'm going to try to get rid of this part of her earring through here. And then now when I come up in here, even with a slightly bigger brush, an option click to sample this and drag this across here. It might look too harsh, but again, Command Shift F is my friend. If I hit 50, it'll fade that a little bit, so I won't have that kind of divot of the lighter color being in there. So I'm going to then come back and do that one more time, and then I'm going to fade it. I tend to be able to do that a little bit. It tends to work a little bit better. So there we go. I got rid of the main things. Here's one more thing that I could end up doing. I'm going to go ahead and say that I want to lighten and whiten her teeth and her eyes. A bunch of different ways to do this. Probably the simplest way, though, is just an introduction to the history brush. I'm going to hold down Command and U to pop up the hue saturation box. I'm going to desaturate the color, which is going to pull some of the yellow out of her teeth, and it's also going to pull some of the pink out of her eyes. And at the same time, I'm going to slide the whiteness down. So I'm going to maybe move the lightness down to maybe +12, and the desaturation to maybe -20. And I'm going to click OK. Problem is I've really messed up the picture by doing that. But if I go up to Window and I pull down to History, the step before the last one is where everything was great. This one is with my little teeny adjustment. So if I go back to the Fade Clone Stamp, that's where I want to be. Now I go get the History brush. It's the brush tool with this extra little arrow on it, and it's right below the Clone Stamp tool. If I click on that, and if I make a maybe 50% size brush, and I keep it pretty small, like at 10 or 15 pixels, I come over to the History palette, and I click this icon beside the hue saturation. Again, remember, I'm on the Fade Clone Stamp, her skin is cool. I go to the hue saturation, this is where I blew the picture out. I want to go back to the Fade Clone Stamp layer, but I want to check on the hue saturation. In a way, I went back in time to here, to the back layer, where her skin was still bright, but I am painting from the future when I did the hue saturation thing, and then just with a small brush, I can come in here and wiggle this on her eyeballs to get rid of some of that pink, get some of the veins in through there. And then I can also very carefully with this brush, as long as I don't get up too much on her gums or go too much on her lips, I'm just painting along here. I'm not clicking any option button or anything. And again, if I wanted to kind of see what I did here, that's her teeth before and after. And here's maybe her eyeballs all the way back to where it was at the original part. Or here I am with slightly whiter eyes and whiter teeth, just in case I needed to do that. And now that I'm done, I can just go on up here and maybe change the name of this thing to I fixed this, save it as a JPEG, click Save, leave the quality at maybe a 9 or a 10, and click OK. And that's all there is to fixing her.